whatever else. So I'm going to be covering those 3 examples, which should give you a pretty good understanding of different ways to lead score. But before we do that, I'm going to need to go and show you something that is unfortunately a little awkward in ConvertKit at the moment. I have been told they're working on this. So if by the time you're watching this, if greater than or less than or greater than or equal to or less than or equal to operators exist in your automations, then you can ignore this part that I'm about to cover. But for everyone else, if you're watching this before ConvertKit supports advanced operators, I want to show you a common pattern that we'll be using throughout this lesson. So when I talk how to trigger different actions or activities or whatever else based on a lead score threshold being met, what we're going to be doing more often than not is something like the following. So let's say we have an email course score that we'll be looking at, and we'll say something like, what we want to do is we want to say, if the score is, say, above 8, then we want to do this. Otherwise, we want to do that. So that's going to be our goal. The problem is there's no way within ConvertKit with a custom field to do anything besides, is this custom field set, or does this custom field equal a certain value? So let's say you want to say if they hit 10 or above in their score, we want to send them a email sequence. Well, there's no way of doing that at the moment because there's no way of saying if a certain email course lead score is above, greater than or equal to 10, then send the sequence. So I'm going to show you how to get around that right now. So we're going to be using Liquid to do this. And this took me a while to figure out how to do this with Liquid, to be honest with you, but it does work. I've confirmed it works, and it does allow you to effectively do greater than or equal to or less than or equal to operations within ConvertKit automations. So the way we do that is what we're going to be doing is when a custom field changes. So in this case, when the email course score underlying value changes at all, let's say it goes from 6 to 7 or nothing to 1 or 10 to 11 or whatever else, this automation will run. What we're going to want to do is say, is it at or above a certain number? And if so, we're going to want to do something, right? So that's the goal we're aiming for. The way we're going to do that is we're going to set a custom field, a temporary custom field, whose only job is going to be to return data in a format that will allow us to do a matches check on a custom field or on this temporary custom field value. So if what I said doesn't make any sense, give me a second. I'm going to try to explain what I mean by this. So remember, we're trying to figure out, is this email course score at or above a certain value? How we're going to do that is we're going to be setting another custom field on the subscriber moving through this automation. And I would encourage you to set up something like temp value or whatever you want to call it as effectively a throwaway custom field that you can use to set data to, check that data, and then move on. And this is really just a way to, store temporary data that we can make decisions off of. It's not something you'll ever use. It's not something that's meant to really be meaningful in any way outside of being able to do computation operations within a ConvertKit automation. So what we're going to do here is we're going to reference the value that triggered this automation. So in this case, we're calling subscriber.emailCourseScore as the Liquid object. So that's going to give us the score that was just updated that ran this automation. And then what we're going to do is we're going to subtract the threshold. So I'll talk in a second what I mean by threshold. But again, that just means something like, if it's 8 or above, 10 or above, 6 or above, I'm going to say it's 6. So let's say we want anyone who has a score of 6 or greater to be, sent an email sequence. So I'm going to subtract 6 from whatever the customs or the email course score is now. So if it's 5, it'll become -1. If it's 12, it will become 6. If it's 10, it will become 4, so on and so forth. So we're going to do this, and I'm going to run the minus filter to do that. So minus with the argument of 6, we'll just subtract 6. Now, I don't want to go too deep down the Liquid rabbit hole here. I'd encourage you to watch my lesson on Liquid templating if you haven't yet. But what I'm about to say is probably not going to make much sense unless you're a developer. But the way Liquid's implemented is when we subtract 6. So every custom field is a string. So if you don't know what a string is just like, it's a combination of letters and numbers. So your first name is a string, or theoretically, I am 6 years old is also a string, or even the number 6 could be a string. And it is in the way that ConvertKit does things behind the scenes. ConvertKit doesn't know that this value in a custom field is a number or it's a word. It doesn't, so everything is a string. But when we subtract 6, when we call -6, Liquid, which is the templating engine, is going to convert that string into a number, into an integer. And the problem is what we're going to be doing after we get that number back. So we subtract 6, we need to treat it as a string again. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to call another filter called downcase, which again, if you've watched my lesson on Liquid, or if you just probably can wager a guess, downcase will take a word or a string and lowercase it all. Now you're probably thinking, all right, so lesson email course score comes in as 4. We subtract 6, -2. How do you downcase -2? Well, you really can't. But -2 as a number, downcased will become -2 as a string, which is what we want. So we need downcase to not break Liquid. So if it's still confusing, just trust me on this one. Implement it exactly how I'm showing it right here. So we're going to downcase this to give us a string. Again, we're going to pretend this is -2 because the score of 4 came through. And then we're going to split it on a minus sign. So what this is going to do is this is going to call another filter called split, which what it will do is it's usually used for something like, let's say you have hello world as a value in a field. You call split with a space, and that will give you hello and world, a list of 2 things, 2 strings, hello and world. When we call split on this value we have here, one of 2 things happens. If it's a negative number, the list will become a blank value, so an empty string as we call it, and the number. So if it's -2, you call split on with the negative character, and it will come back with a blank string and 2. If you call split with a negative on the number 5, +5, no -5, call it on that, it will return 1 value, which is just 5. So what we're going to do is we're going to split it, and then we're going to bring back the first value. So remember what I said, if it's a negative number, the first value will be a blank string, an empty string. Otherwise, the first value will be the number. So to make it simple, if it's a negative number, meaning it's below our threshold, the first value will be a blank string. Otherwise, if it's above our threshold, it will be a number. Okay? So why we're doing this is what's going to happen here is now temp value on this subscriber is going to be either a blank string or a number. And then what we can do here is we can set up a condition that says, do they have the custom field of temp value equal to a blank value? Watch what's about to happen. ConvertKit's validation is not going to let me do this. ConvertKit wants me to have a value here. So I could do something like this. I could do has a value, where what this will do is it will say, if it has a value, meaning it's above our threshold, it will go down the yes path. So that's what I'm going to do here, is I'm going to just use that kind of shorthand notation here to make that true. So remember, yes means it's above the threshold. No means it's below it. So what I can do here is, let's say I want to do something when the email course score, in this case, is above 6. So 6 or above. Down the yes path, I could say, fire off this pitch sequence or something like that, right? So we're going to be using this model again.